acting from the University of Missouri at Kansas in 2004. She received her BFA in professional theater, acting and directing from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University in 2001. And she graduated from North Carolina School of Arts High School with a concentration in drama in 1997. She has additional training. She's a certified Michael Chekhov acting teacher, participating in the New York Film Academy. She is been at a summer theater intensive workshop in the Stella Adler Conservatory of Acting in the summer of 2000. And she is a powerhouse apprentice training graduate from Vassar College in the summer of 1998. As I said before, her current research focuses on 3 African-American female playwrights, Dominique Morissault, Nicola Salter, and Nambi Keller. She has presented workshops on these writers and made presentations at various universities in the region and nationally. She has been well recognized for her work. In 2016, for example, she was awarded a grant from the Michigan Humanities Council for her year-long project, Detroit 1967, Page to Stage. And she has performed one-woman dramas such as Flying on a Broken Wing, Hella, The Immortal Cell Line of Henrietta Lacks, and Testimonies of Truth. And she's received several grants for her work, including a Michigan Heritage Grant in 2016. And she's received honors for her scholarship, which includes the Director's Award from the National Association of Dramatic and Speech Arts. And she's a member of the Association of Theater in Higher Education, Black Theater Networks, and so on. So I've been skipping in my short, abbreviated introduction. I decided to skip because I want to get on to tell you that the Unity Center is deeply grateful for her involvement in our work. She is currently a resident scholar, and she has been a resident scholar since 2017, and she has given several Brahma talks. This is not the first one. She has been involved in our working groups. One of our co-presenters today is Prall, who is currently lecturer of dance here at Wayne State University, instructing Afro-modern and Central African dance courses. She's the artistic director of the African Dance Company, entitled To Sangana in the Theater and Dance Department. She shares the artistic directorship to the Freedom Players, that is the Black Theater and Dance, and the founder and artistic director of Arts of Motion Dance Theater here in Detroit. Ms. Prall has worked extensively in the Detroit Public School area, presenting lectures and demonstrations and productions for years. She's a member of the International Association of Blacks in Dance, The Gathering, and the Detroit Durham Legacy Program. Her early training in New York at the Alvin Haley School of Dance, Theater of Harlem, and the Martha Graham School of Dance has prepared her well for her work here. Since 2016, she's been working with the dance company from Monrovia, Liberia, entitled Ballets or Vanjé, teaching and working on how to sustain company and the traditional music and dance of the area. She has received the President's Award for Excellence in Teaching here at Wayne State University. She achieved that in 2017. for research, study, instruction, and performance have taken her to New York, New York, in Congo, Brazzaville, and Congo, Kinshasa, to Havana, Cuba, and Santiago de Cuba, to Dakar, Senegal, to Monrovia, Liberia, to Accra, Ghana, to Paris, France, to Mali, to Paramaribo in Suriname, and Edinburgh, Scotland. The third performer here today is Dr. Mikey Courtney. He's a dance practitioner, researcher, educator, and a life mission. He has a life mission to spread universal understanding to global communities throughout the world. Dr. Ras holds a BFA in modern dance from the U Arts in Philadelphia, an advanced MA in ethno-choreology from the University of Limerick in Ireland. There he also completed his PhD in arts practice research. Rass's research explores movement as cultural knowledge, emphasizing his embodiment of Ethiopian and other world cultures, which he uses as tools in his urban contemporary or creative process. Dr. Ras is currently an assistant professor of dance at Wayne State University. And his motto is, "Movement is life. I am a lifeist." So I want you to welcome to the podium, to the stage, the performance, these three outstanding Wayne State University faculty. And I want you to do that with applause.
Prall is she will be giving her own presentation
November 21st.
November 21st about
but yeah, that's another one that will be in this building. So come and see her and see Afrobeat and whatnot and everything. So she will be within this one, but still she will be premiering on that.
If we need more dance, we're going to do more African dance and how it is metamorphosis.
She has a class that's conflicting with this time, so she has to go.
Thank you. So, if you're not aware, see, we all have, if you see all the people with the Freedom Players t-shirts, Freedom Players is one of the two ensembles within the Black Theater and Dance Collective. And in our efforts to reflect the times of our ever-changing social and political climate, we developed a theater ensemble that deals with the social issues that are going on currently. And so that's what Freedom Players culminates. It's a theater ensemble that deals with social issues, dealing with race, gender, sexuality, masculinity, womanhood, and all the current things that are going on to reflect those times, and to give a space where the students and our audience can be able to have that type of feedback in a more theatrical setting and be able to see what's being reflected in our life and be able to talk and have more of an outlet in that type of capacity. And so we have toured around the Detroit public school, the Detroit metro area, and then also ultimately we toured to Edinburgh Fringe Festival last summer. And so just to give you a little synopsis about that, you can go to the next one. And so within this framework, last year, Ross, Mikey, and I, we were deciding on what theme we were going to have for the coming year, and we decided on liberation. And so we were thinking, what is that going to be, and how we're going to do that? And ultimately, it came up to we formulated the title "I Am," and it is about the continual challenge of seeking liberation. As a group of young Detroiters meet and interact, challenges arise as they realize Their birth was political. This play offers us a creative opportunity to initiate conversations about race, gender, sexuality, masculinity, and privilege. As you see, it's like, man, that's a lot of things that are going on in that play. But within that, it all deals with identity. And one big thing, even when you're older, like with us as older individuals, that you older than me. With young people, especially dealing with that identity and dealing with being aware of your identity, that's really an important area that we love to deal with opening up the culture, the masculinity and sexuality and all that, to give a place where they can be able to have their voice and open up and be able to use their life to have their life reflected on the stage. And so, with that in mind, next slide. So overall, within the Freedom Players, our purpose is we want to use theater as a way to educate, restore, empower, and of course, we're in theater, we entertain. That's what we do, you know. But at the same time, sometimes some plays are not empowering, you know. Sometimes it's not restorative. But even with, you will see within the show, we use this as a way to restore and empower, because so many things that are going on within our life nowadays, and as you see in the news and all this craziness that goes on in your life, that as young people and all of us, we need a place where we can feel empowered and we can have a place where we can dialogue about these uncomfortable issues that are going on in the world. And we use Freedom Players as that space to be able to do that. And so within this framework, we have been using this ensemble to study this and write papers on it, and going into dialogue on how we can use this as a way to inform others and allow this space to grow.
So to talk a little bit about how we actually put this whole play together, we had to kind of come, go to the next slide. We had to come to some consensus of what we understood liberation to be. Myself and Billicia come from the East Coast, we're both from the South. She's from the dirty, I'm from
Dirty.
But so we both have had our own personal experiences with our understanding of liberation, and we brought those personal experiences into this creative process. But using liberation as a thematic concept, we first had to figure out, well, what is liberation and what are we liberating from? And how are we going to get these students to understand our approach towards liberation and what they are essentially liberating themselves from, and how we can continue to help them to be on this journey, to an ongoing journey of liberating themselves from what? From what we would like to say as white, Eurocentric, patriarchal, colonial institutions that regulate all of human existence. Whether or not we really want to accept it, that's the world that we live in, usually very much constructed by white men. And so ultimately, when you think about liberation, we have to kind of, and with this presentation being the decolonization of the arts, the whole notion of what has colonized us, what has oppressed us. These are the things that we first have to start to unpack in order to figure out how to get on that pathway to liberation and on that pathway to decolonizing what we create as artists. So this was the question that we brought to the students during the audition process. So we asked all the students to prepare a piece that essentially exemplifies what does liberation mean to me. And again, this is the Black Theater and Dance Collective, so we not only had theater students that were auditioning, we also had dance students that were auditioning. So you have the option of how you engaged with text, how you engaged with movement, but ultimately whatever piece that you auditioned needed to express in some capacity what liberation meant to you as an individual. And so after we had the audition, we recognized that many of the students didn't necessarily understand the concept of liberation the same way that we did. So we needed to give them more artists and scholars to provide more of a theoretical framework of where we were working from, so that they would develop a better understanding of how they could approach the theme of liberation within the creative process of I Am. So some of these artists and scholars were Paulo Freire, Robin DiAngelo, Angela Davis, George Yancey, Nikki Giovanni, Bell Hooks, and we also incorporated some documentary films or other footage that we had seen that reinforced some of the theories of these particular writers in a more modern aspect that was more relatable to some of the young people that were involved in the audition process. The Mask You Live In, Misrepresentation, and Hip Hop Evolution, I think these are all on Netflix as well. So this gave a lot of the performers a deeper sense of where we were coming from and our approach towards the exploration of this particular topic.
So delving into the creative process, like with one of our favorite scholars, Prall, he says, authority must be on the side of freedom, not against it. He also says the problem-posing educator constantly reforms his reflections in the reflection of the students. The students, no longer docile listeners, are now critical co-investigators in dialogue with the teacher. And so with this, our aim was to really empower, like that's one of our goals, was to empower these students, that they were the ones who are writing the script, they're the ones who are bringing in these ideas, and so then they can feel that they are empowered and that they have ownership to this script, that they have ownership to this ensemble. Yes, we are the directors, and ultimately, yes, we can pull down that gauntlet whenever we felt like it, but still, they have a voice in this ensemble. Their voice should be heard, and listening to them is as much educational for us as what we were able to offer them. So that continual dialogue helped both of us be able to grow, because I grew so much just listening to them, listening to their world, because sometimes, even though I've been that age, the older you get, sometimes you don't realize some of the things that they're really going through. And that helped us be able to culminate, put the script together so that I can be able to use their words and then also bring some of my words to still give them the voice that it should from their perspective. So yes, that's using that inspired us to be able to delve into that more. And then going to the next slide. And then with the various methods employed in this creative process, we use verbal and movement improvisations, inspired from Browning, and also field research, where they're using their own life stories and their situations and talking about those and writing those in journal writings. And then guided group discussions, where we had various articles and discussing those things and discussing the current events that are going on within the world today. Next slide.
And as we mentioned, once we started to develop, this underlying theme of liberation, we always had to think about what the opposition to liberation was, and developing the understanding that oppression would ultimately be the opposition of liberation. And thinking about ways in which the students had been oppressed, what types of things about their identity or their gender or their sexuality or their sex in general, the types of privileges they may have had, their race, their skin color, what types of things have they been oppressed about. And in order to really understand how we can then put them on the path to actually acknowledging, I always tell my students that awareness is the key to change. So once you recognize what has oppressed you or what you feel like has colonized you, then you can work towards changing those things within your creative process and within your own individual expression. So we brainstormed. We did a lot of brainstorming during the creative process, during the early days of the creative process, and these are actually images from the brainstorming that we did with the students. And as you can see, there's liberation and oppression on one side of the board, and then we started to unpack all the layers of oppression, like skin color, and the different things associated with skin color, and ultimately digging into how we view ourselves as individuals, how we view our own identity for ourselves, and what we actually wanted to reflect and represent to the communities that we engaged with. So as you can see, on another day, we started to brainstorm about identity and looking at identity in relationship to our culture, our gender, our sexuality, and then also identity in relationship to our physical makeup. We had a lot of people that were of the African American demographic, so looking at hair was a very common topic, especially for the females, natural hair versus hair that you bought, and how that affects your understanding of yourself and your approach towards how you want to project yourself within society. Also looking at things about your institutional upbringing, and that being your home, your educational system, your church that you may have belonged to. Within a home setting, how does you growing up in a single parent household affect how you see yourself as a man or as a young woman. All these types of things we started to unpack. And as we discussed these things, we also engaged them with more writing exercises to really get their understanding of their own identity within the scope of this concept of liberation.
And so, continuing on within the rehearsal process, we explored a variety of movement and improvisation exercises and creative and active improvisations. Within that, there was within the movement and improvisation explorations, dance, physical gestures, and dance and movement. And we have two little video clips to show some of those examples. And we can start with the first one with showing Karen Prall when she was in there working with the students, sending energy to one another. Because at first, really developing in the fall semester, how can we grow together as an ensemble and feeling that energy and having trust with one another. And so you can press play. And so sending and receiving that energy, how is that energy? How did you receive that energy, and then how do you send it to someone else? And going back and forth with that, we did that a couple of times, and then going into the next video.
So the next video, essentially we explored the notion of our collective sense of moving towards a common goal. We use certain partnering techniques like weight sharing and counterbalance to really just explore how we can engage with sharing our body together, being able to support ourselves, but then also being able to support someone else while we are supporting ourselves. So this is just an example of some of the movement exploration during the early parts of the creative process that the students were experiencing. Alright, so weight in, going all the way down. You get to this side, you make your transition to weight away. Take it back the other way. Stagger yourselves. Open up the space, stagger yourself so that you're not on the same line, so that you can partner to the next one. It's not rocket science. You ready? You see how this can be a quite uncomfortable situation to get into. But by the end of it, they were very open to exploring how they could connect to each other. This was literally, I think, the first day that we started to explore this style of partnering, this style of weight sharing.
Does not have to stay in
So
one
the
shape
idea
the
is
whole time.
that
I want to see how you
the plumb line is between the two individuals. So if one person moves, you'll both fall.
Fall at all times. Surfaces of the back need to be connected. You're going to do the back to back. One person can't be pushing and the other one not.
And again, a lot of the things that we were using within the exploration process come from our own experience as professionals and as practitioners. So that's just an example of some of the exploration exercises that we did that then also led back into the creative writing.
And so, back, well, it's okay. We can stay there. With the going into the creative writing, we use those experiences. One, when they began to move and dance and do weight sharing and all that with one another, they began to be more comfortable with each other's bodies and then were able to be more expressive to each other and talk about their life circumstances to each other. Because at first, everybody was like all polite, like, hey, and I do this and this. But then they started to open up a little bit more and more, and then they started arguing like brothers and sisters. And so, and that's what we wanted. It became a family.
They were a lot more vulnerable and a lot more intimate. And as artists and performers, that was really where we were trying to get them into that space, where they could be generous with their own personal experience and open themselves up to that vulnerability and not really be afraid to expose their true selves to the audience that's there.
And so within that framework, they began to open up more of their creative writing and talking about different circumstances, and more ideas came about. Also, we had different themes within like some acting improvisations that I would say we're talking about, create a scene about hair, and I would give them 5 minutes to make something up, and boom, they'll come out there, and that would help get us ideas, and I would videotape these different scenes and whatnot, and then write some of them down. And then some things they were inspired to when we were just exploring some stuff, and then they would journal some things down. And through that, I took all of their writing, and made a puzzle out of it, and pieced it all together, and then implemented some little stuff across Mikey and my stuff, and created this whole script. And that we continued expanding more and more as time moved on. And with one of the scenes that we developed is from Micah and Morgan, that they were dealing with their world as black women, and with the colorism issue as a light-skinned black woman and as a dark-skinned black woman. And they're going to come up, and you can press play with the sound, and they're going to perform that for you right now.
Interesting to me. Light skin that equates to beauty. I'm trapped by the constant concern that what I look like is the most interesting thing about me, and I don't think that I have. And ironically, the thought that traps me the most is that I need everyone to think that I'm beautiful. I'm trapped by someone else's standard of beauty. Why do I hold something so close that is so fleeting? Well, I'm reaching to break free. I'm reaching for my worth, not in my skin, but my worth as a person, honing in my talents and the values that actually hold in other people's lives, and not just how they compliment.
One of the most popular products in developing countries is skin whitening cream. We're talking about places that are majority people of color. Can you believe that? So how am I expected to love myself in a place where dark complexion is consistently looked at as criminal? Long, straight hair will always confirm my beauty to others. So yes, taking away my weave is like taking away my pride. This fills the void, the emptiness inside.
Racism is bad enough, but receiving the same hate from your own is worse. Where do you go? Is my pigment all that you see? As if we weren't all put in the same category. Black. You put me into the stereotypical box based off one glance at me. No, I'm not bougie. No, I don't have an attitude problem, and no, I don't think that I'm better than you. This whole focus on complexion confuses me on who I should be.
How do you tell the one person in your life,
the one person that tells you that you can't do this, and that you're not pretty enough,
that you're not good enough, that you're not skinny enough? How do you tell that one person to step off
when that person is yourself? It's that sick voice inside,
constantly telling you that you're not good enough? So when will I be enough?
We dug into some serious topics and some serious personal things that these particular players were dealing with. And really, it became a type of therapy for us as well as the performers. It became a way for them to really deal with how they saw themselves, to deal with how they wanted the world to see them. And our next performer Cam's story is really exemplary of that level of therapy and how his performance, in essence, was a way for him to become more comfortable with who he was as a black man, as a gay black man, living in the world that he lives in, to where he actually came out in every performance because it was a part of the dialogue and the script. And from his own experience after performing this, he realized that it really did help him in his day-to-day with accepting who he was outside of the performance realm. So, Cam's story.
Don't ask, don't tell. This is the kind of world that we live in. We cannot openly discuss ourselves or our situations without some kind of judgment. People turn things into such a taboo. People are so quick to dismiss things that they don't understand. I'm a black man, a gay black man. A gay black man who has a black family. A gay black man who lives in a black community. A community that still finds who I am to be evil and in need of repentance. I don't need repentance, I need respect. Do ask, and I'll tell. We live in a world where voices are being kept quiet. The discussions are being avoided. Even my very own gay community shuts me out, as I'm still reminded that I'm black. My skin color constantly shows, but my sexuality doesn't. I'm not gonna hide who I am. That would be a disadvantage to myself. Do ask, and I'll tell. Thank you.
So, as you can see, as an audience member, this would bring up different things that we may have experienced in our own lives. So we felt that it was very important to always engage with the audience in post-performance discussions or talkbacks, especially in the local area, in the greater Detroit area. So we always make sure to have these discussions and engage with the audience so that we can develop more of a sense of how we could broaden our own topics within our production.
Yeah, and even having these talkbacks, it helped us see, is this like really affecting people? What is it relevant? And many of the audience members, they ended up opening up about certain things that happened in their lives. And so it ended up, we were able to gather more material and really use that as a way to garner more ideas and creating more scenes, and really using that as a dialogue, as a way of, and also proving that theater is a way to open up that conversation and is a way of healing for both the performers and the audience. So those were very successful, and then ultimately, you can go to the next slide. All of this entire journey last year led us to go the end of July, beginning of August, to Edinburgh, Scotland, to the Edinburgh Fringe Fest, where we performed there and really had great audiences there and received wonderful feedback. And many of the audience members talked to us and talked how they were affected by it, and it was the first time many of them had ever really seen a performance by an African American, a group that was by African Americans, and seeing those different struggles that we had in this play. And so it was a way to showcase Wayne State University, and then seeing, and for them to see African Americans in a different light than the general negativity that's always been displayed in the news and other media. And going to the next slide. And so for the future plans for this, what Ross, Mikey, and I call the I Am Project, because this idea ultimately came up with the idea of liberation, and that question began to evolve to us, like, what is liberation in other countries of the African diaspora, right? Here in Detroit, students may have a certain viewpoint and things that they're going through, but is that the same on the East Coast, on the West Coast? What is the dialogue there in the South? And then also going abroad to South Africa, to Ethiopia, to Brazil, South America, to Trinidad. And so our plans are to continue writing grants and to use this framework as a way to go to other countries and develop a play there to open up that dialogue to see what does liberation look like in all of these various countries. And ultimately we would continue to collect data and develop a book from that. And so that is our hope, and still continuing here to develop more, because we have new students this semester, and it's different things that are coming out from that, and so we're continuing it on here, but then still using working on grants to continue to go abroad to see how we can to see what we'll discover.
And so, next slide. The last slide, We Are Vessels. That was the culminating song that we developed for the end of the play. The lyrics were written by our own Brooklyn Parks, and she performed the song as well. And it really represented the fact that each and every individual freedom player was just a vessel expressing these ideals that may have been their own personal experience, could have been the personal experience of someone else who was in the group, but a vessel to be able to share this personal experience with someone else so that they may be able to go and use that experience in a way that's going to help them communicate or understand somebody else that they encounter in their day-to-day. So before we open up the space for the talkbacks and the discussions and the questions and the answerings, we would love for the freedom players to come and perform We Are Vessels.
Forward ever, backward never.
We are vessels, we're more than enough. We shine bright like diamonds in the rough. We are vessels, we stand strong with open arms. We are love for all. You are enough. There is nothing that you cannot do. Never. Want to let this from the view. I'll be right.
to you all with anything you want to ask about the process or anything.
No? Bueller?
Bueller,
Yes.
will you be going to Scotland again?
We hope so.
Yeah, hope so. Not in 2020, but we hope so. And then also, we're looking at in the future going to other places of the diaspora with the show. And so, who knows right now at this moment specifically where we'll be going, but but definitely Edinburgh and other places are in mind. We're always open. So if anybody has some money on them just sitting in your pocket, we will take any donations. Yes. Yes.
So I'm curious, you talked about the audience talkbacks we don't have after the performances, and it being that it sounds like a lot of the audiences that you're performing for are made up of people who hold privileged identities, who are
Not always.
Not always.
No, because we performed, before we went to Scotland, we performed the play in the greater Detroit area. Some of the performances were actually here at the university. So everybody that showed up was not from a very privileged background.
Right, so not everybody, but
Yeah.
some people in the
Yeah,
audience.
definitely.
I'm curious in terms of the, that the work is, as you mentioned, clearly therapeutic for the performers, and I'm sure a lot of the people in the audience who experience oppression. I'm curious if you've had, just knowing that for people who hold privilege, that, acknowledging oppression can, bring up kind of resistance for them, kind of denial sort of thing. I'm curious as to whether you've had conversations that have come up in the talkbacks that had kind of forced people in the audience to kind of stretch themselves a bit.
I think definitely, I definitely feel like those experiences, we did encounter them. I think that many of the people who had to stretch their thinking weren't as vocal about that stretching of their thinking. For the ones who were, my favorite go-to is White Fragility and Robin DiAngelo. So it's a very good depiction of what you're talking about, that defensive nature that people may get and say, well, I'm not a racist, well, I'm not an oppressor, but it's a part of the institution of the world that we live in. So we all are institutionalized with racial tendencies, whether or not, even as people of color, in this country specifically. So I think it was a great way to allow people to see their own reaction and their own response to something that they may or may not have been familiar with. And all the time, people aren't really going to be open enough to ask the question or to say, I never really thought about it that way. Nobody wants to appear ignorant. So, yes.
My aunt, she is very white. My cousins, I'm mixed. But same thing with my cousins, and my cousins came to the show. My cousin and my aunt came to our very first show that we had, and I speak throughout the show in the process. I was talking about my identity as being a Latino woman, and living in this world of where I'm not white, I'm not black, but I'm still part of this minority group that is often kind of forgotten about. But my aunt, when she saw the show, and I was talking about in my monologue about my identity, she didn't realize that me and my cousins go through this, we had been going through this whole process of who are we? We're not we're American. We were born here in America, but sometimes people question how American are you? Where are you really from? And so she didn't talk back in the talkback, but it was that moment that she was oh my gosh, my own children and my nieces and nephews who are Peruvian, they are dealing with this identity of feeling lost of where do you fall in. So it was for her that was a moment she's a white privileged lady, and it was that moment of whoa, I didn't even realize that my own kids or my own family, my niece is going through this, what have my kids gone through that they haven't really talked about with me. So it was that moment of where it was she opened her eyes and and now sees the world differently too, and sees our identity, her children's my identity differently too.
Also within that framework that, with that, and if people, even if it was a majority marginalized audience, that some of them who may not have been gay, that, you know, some of the themes of talking about LGBTQ, that some people that I was talking to afterwards, they were like, I didn't know that that was something that people are going through, because marginalized people marginalize other marginalized people too. And so it brought up those conversations because it is really ironic how you could be so distant from that idea that, you know, to me, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, since I'm marginalized, I don't want to marginalize anybody else, but that's not how everybody thinks. And so sometimes you use another marginalization as a way of, at least I'm in a better condition, at least I'm not that, and how hypocritical we are. And so it did bring up those type of conversations too, and things that people were not even aware of.
Who had a question over here?
Okay. If you have time. What was some of the feedback that you guys did get from abroad? You just mentioned that you did get out. How was it received and everything?
Very well received. And what she said earlier was that this was a cultural experience for many people. Like even the groups that were from the States had never seen a devised play like this. So let alone people from the States, you can imagine when people from out of the States, from Scotland, that actually had participated in, how they felt to have something that they felt was really real, that they could take away and say, okay, now I can change the way that I'm thinking about African Americans or the Black American experience, now that I've seen this kind of real story being told. And even there was a group that, two of the professors from one of the universities were from the Caribbean. And they themselves could identify with certain aspects and themes within the play, but they themselves were even saying that this is something that needs to go out and needs to be shared and needs to be developed and exposed through the framework that we've created with other communities. So I don't think that I remember hearing anything negative about the performance. We got standing ovations pretty much, you know. The Freedom Players is open to non-majors.
Yeah, we have an audition. We audition at the end of the school year and also at the beginning of the school year, and that's why we have a new crop of students. And this, the dynamic of the students this year is actually majority white. We have 6 white young ladies, and then 3 African Americans and 1 Arab American. And so, I mean, within that color, you know, race framework, and then within there we have a variety of people within the LGBTQ community, and so it varies on that, and then class, separating all that, and so it's different viewpoints bringing up those conversations. So with every year, it brings up different focal points, different discussions, and it adds more layers to it, because there's other things that we may emphasize a little bit more on for this year that may come up and to bring up more conversations on different subject matters.
So yes, David, you could be a part if you want. We can talk more about it later. We got time for about 1 or 2 more. Anyone? Yeah. By the way, this is Allison McCall. She is. So, all the images that you see were done by her, and she was a very integral part to us being in Scotland and making sure everything went smoothly.
Yes. Question about the most revelatory moments in creating this. Like, what were some of the moments? Because you spoke to learning things and learning, this is from everybody. Would you all speak to maybe particular revelations that you experienced while creating this, or had unexpected things that you didn't even?
It's a talk back for me, and I don't know if the white minds that I bring this up, but like his mother in the talkback was very touched by a scene in one of the first renditions of I Am, because it was a scene that she identified with her own upbringing. It's the cat call scene where guys are just sitting there, you know, girls are walking by and they're yelling.
Let me get some fries, that shit.
You know, and all that kind of stuff. And so she was able to think back to her own childhood and how she carried this into her adulthood and had actually educated her own daughters in a way to where she was repressing this memory. And then after seeing it on stage, she realized, oh my gosh, I have been teaching my daughters a certain sort of way to respond to this type of situation based upon my own personal experience. And I'm now recognizing that I probably would not have done that if I had been exposed to something like this that let me know that I could be empowered as a black woman and did not necessarily have to deal with that level of persecution, so to speak. That was one of the biggest moments of wow. And I kept going to Billicia this show is going to change people's lives. You know what I mean?
And really talking about embodiment and decolonization, how when after the show, people, the audience members, and even just watching these young people grow within their whole body, that now they have a space where they have a voice, where they're walking through these hallways with some ownership, with my race, my sexuality, where I'm from, and whatever, that it can be heard, and I'm a human being, and I deserve to be heard, and I have purpose here. Just to see that within their body, how they walk through space, change throughout the year. And that's, because I had another student who not a part of the Freedom Players, but she's graduated, who said that when I with all the marginalized groups, and she was talking about race because she was a Latina student, that she said when with all the marginalized groups, we walk into college and have to understand the white experience. And we are never able to have a full understanding of who we are. We're never embraced with our own identity. Whereas as a white student, you come in and you're embraced every day about who you are in your classes. Talk about theater, you're talking about white history, everything is white, and the majority of the students are white, and there's nothing wrong with the majority of the students that are white, but everything comes from that white perspective. And so then even when you're talking about something within marginalized groups, that is like a side piece kind of thing, that it makes you feel as if it's not important. And so who you are, that is worthless. So she was telling me that she would love it where she could have come in and to have been embraced with who she is, and where everybody, even all races, can understand all these other races and all these other areas, so everybody can be able to walk through this space to feel encouraged, to be empowered, and to be acknowledged. And so that's what decolonization means for me. Really being able to scrape away that oppression and to be able to have everybody feel like who they are can be embraced, encouraged, empowered. So then when they leave out of here, they have something they can walk through space and say, I have this history and I am somebody. Wherever I come from, I have something, and to be proud and be vocal about that. And then be able to use this educational experience to be able and to build on that and to bring somebody up. Because that's what it's